Gary, what are you doing?
Spin around in circles.
Why?
Well, I represent animal senses, and animal senses are circular.
Oh, so that's why you're going in circles, right?
Oh, of course not.
Oh. See, the stupidity of your answer told my brain that it should hate. Which brings us to the idea of sensory reception. First of all, stimuli such as light or touch are taken in by receptors on our skin. These can be either nerve cells or other epithelial cells. So then, the signal is transmitted to our brain through an action potential. And an action potential is basically when the membrane potential of a cell rises above a level called a crucial potential, like this. So then at the brain, the information is processed, and a response is generated which brings the signal back to the cell. And the response is carried out. So Gary, did you get all that?
Well, not really. But then, this leads us to our next point. Live from Winnetka! Welcome to Saturday afternoon.
It's Saturday
noon.
With
Anthony Wong, Ellen Yu, and Mary Kim.
musical guest
Mary Kim,
and your host,
Anthony Wong.
ladies and gentlemen.
Anthony Wong.
Alright, thank you guys. You did a great show, man. I can feel the electricity of the band over there. You know, I can smell you guys in the audience. And these are all caused, you know, by different action potentials that are sent to my brain, and it depends where they're being sent that distinguishes electricity and smell and sight, whatever. And, you know, these action potentials that are sent to my brain, they're called sensations. Sensations. And when my brain interprets these sensations, you know, they give me a perception, man. A perception, you know, I can perceive the smell. And it's just great, it's just great. And, you know, this is done through sensory perception by our sensory receptors, man. And, you know, these sensory receptors are neurons or epithelial cells, okay? And this can be done by two kinds of receptors. They can be exteroreceptors, which is like detecting the stimuli outside, or interoreceptors, detecting the stimuli inside. And all stimuli is really energy, and when these receptors, you know, they receive that energy is turned into signals which are then sent to the brain, and, you know, up here. And this is done in 4 simple steps. Step 1, sensory transduction. This is a change in the energy of the stimulus, and this leads to a change in the membrane potential, and this is really called reception potential. And also, step 2, amplification. It changes the intensity of the nerve and its strength, and this is done via the signal transduction pathway. And step 3 is transmission, the conduction of impulses to the central nervous system. And step 4 is the processing of information, or integration. And this is like, for example, a sensory adaptation, where it's a decrease of responsiveness to repeated stimuli, such as a heartbeat. You know, you don't feel every single heartbeat, right? And you see, that finally concludes how. Ladies and gentlemen, Gary Kim with his new hit single, Receptors. Receptor, stimulated forms of energy, like when your hair cells detect motion. Pain receptors detect pain to help us from getting hurt. Associated with temperature. When it's really hot or cold. Chemoreceptors nutrition and solutions like none. They also include receptors that detect taste and smell. Electromagnetic receptors detect light, electricity, magnetism, also known as photoreceptors in our eyes.
Okay, what are you doing?
Alan, shut up. You're breaking my concentration. I'm having a staring contest with my imaginary friend. I think I'm about to win.
That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Here, I'll have a staring contest.
Alright, remember, I won.
So the reason you're watching this show is because you have eyes. Now, humans aren't the only creatures with eyes. See, in planarians, like flatworms, they have things called eye cups, So these allow them to see light, but they can detect light, but they can't really, see like we do. And then also we have crustaceans and the insects. They have compound eyes. You know what are compound eyes? Compound eyes have lots of structures called ommatidia. Now each ommatidium can see a tiny little part of the visual field, basically everything you can see. And then all these ommatidia combine to form one image. It's like putting together a jigsaw puzzle. One piece here, one piece there, one piece there. And then finally, in other invertebrates like jellies and spiders, you have something called a single lens eye. In a single lens eye, light enters the eye through one single lens. That's why it's called the single lens eye, duh. And then it's focused by muscles on the retina. Okay, now on to the most important eye of them all, the human eye. The human eye is covered with a layer of connective tissue called the sclera, and also with an inner pigmented layer called the choroid. So, also there's an epithelial layer called the conjunctiva, which basically makes a mucous membrane and keeps an eye nice and moist. So the cornea is a part of the sclera at the front of the eye, and that's what lets the light in. So the light goes in and then past the iris, which is the part of the eye that gives you color. For example, my irises are dark brown. And then what happens is that it goes into the pupil, which is a hole in the center of the iris. And then the eye has two cavities, one between the lens and the cornea, and one behind the lens inside the eyeball. There are two humors, the aqueous humor and the vitreous humor. Aqueous, water-like, vitreous, jelly-like. And these help to focus the image onto the retina, which basically the photoreceptor cells are located. And then the image is determined by changing the shape of the lens. For example, if you're looking at something that's far away, the lens gets flatter and flatter. But if you're looking at something closer, it gets more round. And then the retina has rod cells and cone cells. Rod cells help us see light. It's more sensitive to light, but it's not really good at distinguishing colors. But then you have the cones, which actually can distinguish the colors. But then they take more light because they're less sensitive to it. Okay, so in the eye, or in the retina more specifically, light is absorbed by visual pigments. And then they consist of a pigment called retinol attached to a protein called opsin. And then the rod cells have their own kind of opsin, which is rhodopsin. And then it changes form depending on how much light there is outside. And then this change causes a signal transduction pathway. And then it results in the formation of the receptor potential, which we went over a long time ago. And then also we have horizontal cells and amacrine cells. These cells are the neurons in the retina that help process the information. They then send the information to the brain via action potentials along the optic nerve. The optic nerve is formed by ganglion cells, which are basically nerve cells. And then they cross over at an area